As music teachers, we want our websites to be user-friendly, and one of the best ways that we can do that is to consider the readability of our site. Your site might have good content and great pictures, but if the text is too hard to read, then people are likely to skim through things and not get a hold of all the important information that you've so painstakingly crafted. That's why in this video, we're going to go through 5 tips that will help increase the readability on your website so that people get all of that important information and they make it to the bottom of the page. Hi, my name's Sarah Campbell, and I'm a business strategist, marketing, and mindset coach for music studio owners and online education experts just like you. And the topic of today's video is how to increase the readability of your website. Before we get to the 5 tips that I want to discuss today, let's take a look at what is readability. Readability is a measure of how quickly people can recognize words, sentences, and paragraphs on your website. Studies have shown that readability is a huge factor when it comes to how long people will stay on your website. So that's why these 5 tips are super important. Our first tip is super easy. I want you to take a look at your website and consider the length of your paragraphs. If you have a long paragraph, you're going to want to break that down. Here's an example where we have paragraphs that are taking up 7 lines worth of text. That's a lot to read, and people are likely to skim over those paragraphs and miss the important stuff. In this example, we've taken the same paragraphs and we've broken them up into 2-line paragraphs, and they're much, much easier to read. So those lessons you learned in grammar school about having 5 to 7 sentences per paragraph, we're going to toss them out the window when it comes to website formatting. The second tip is also an easy one. If you have the ability to create a bulleted list rather than a long string sentence with a bunch of information in it, then break it down into a bullet point. This can be especially useful on parts of your website where you might be listing all of the things that are included in your lessons or in your online course, so it makes it very easy for people to understand what they're signing up for. The third tip has to do with your branding, and we want to make sure that we're choosing fonts wisely and making sure that those fonts are simple to read. Now, here are a couple of examples that are quite different. In this first example, you can see that there's a rather fancy font in the paragraph. Now, because it's pretty cool looking, it might be tempting to use. However, if you've chosen to use a fancy font inside of a paragraph, people are probably not going to read it. That's why it's super important to consider using a sans serif font inside of your paragraph rather than something that's fancy and cool looking. Save the fancy and cool looking stuff for your headers. The fourth tip has to do with alignment, and this is super important. Check out these 2 examples. In the top example, you can see that we have a paragraph that is using center alignment. Notice the red lines. Every time your eye gets to the end of a line, it then has to search for the beginning of the next line. That's why it's so much easier to read text that is left aligned rather than center aligned. Think of it this way. Most of the books that you read are left aligned or they might be justified, and centered text is just something that our brains aren't used to using. That doesn't mean that you can't use centered text at all. It just means that we need to be really careful about when we're using those centered texts. Centered text can be great for headings or really short sentences that you want to make stand out, and leave all the rest left aligned. The final tip for this video is that line length matters, especially because some people are reading on large screens. And so we want to consider the number of words and characters that we have in each line. In this example, we can see that we've broken up the paragraphs, but the lines are still reaching the full width of the website. And the character count on that top line is 126 letters. But in this example, we've reduced the character count to only 63 characters, and we've included a graphic. So if you want to reduce the line length, you can do it 2 different ways, by including a graphic like I've done here, or by increasing the margins on the side of the page so that you're creating more white space. For more tips on how you can increase the readability and searchability on your website, head to savvymusicstudio.com/SEO, where you'll find a blog article that I've written specifically for music teachers and how you can increase your search engine optimization. If you've enjoyed today's video, be sure to subscribe and turn on all notifications so that you can get updated for the latest videos that we put out.